launch.
Well, Carol, thank you so much. Welcome to the Conversation Factory once again, or for the first time officially. I'm really glad. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be seen.
um, I, you know, it's so funny because we were just talking about this before we even started about like the question, "How are you?" and how big it is for some people. And I feel like it's this tiny little microcosm of interpersonal dynamics of deciding to, as I do, to say it's good to see you, as opposed to asking a question that can even be harder to answer, like what's lighting you up right now, or there's lots of different ways that
Totally.
people can try to frame that question. I feel like my approach speaks the inarguable truth that it's, hey, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
What do you do when you see people? How do you try to intentionally greet them?
Well, my answer to that is going to be a little bit of a window on how I view interpersonal dynamics in general, which is there's no one size fits all.
Yeah,
It depends on who the person is, what I know about them,
yeah,
uh, whether it's the first time I've ever met them, whether we go back a long way. So, I don't have a stock thing that I say. I usually uh, I often when uncertain, I will do what you did, which is, geez, it's nice to see you, or it's very nice to meet you if I've
mm,
never met somebody. Um, I think in keeping with my general what I teach, frankly, and my general philosophy is starting with a question asks the other person to be potentially to be vulnerable first.
mm-hmm,
And since I think that a willingness to be a little bit vulnerable and becoming more known and seen requires that I take the first step, then I
yeah,
might not start with a question. I
yeah,
might start with, in my case, we were just talking about the fact that I've had long COVID for 2.5 years. And
yeah.
uh, it's when people say to me, "How are you?" That's a complicated question to ask me.
It
Uh,
is.
and so what I what I much prefer is, "How are you right now?" or "How are you today?" if they're going to ask me a question. But the other thing that I often will do, if when I'm the initiator, is I'll say, "Gee, it's really lovely to see you. I'm so happy we're getting a chance to talk because I don't always have the energy these days to do it." Uh,
Yeah,
and then I might stop there. I might not give you my entire life story because you may or may not want to hear it.
right. Yeah.
Uh, and then I take my cues from you based on how you respond.
This is the you're putting the dynamics in the interpersonal dynamics. Like it's not putting your foot in the same river twice, and waiting to see where the energy is coming back
Yeah, yeah,
from the
yeah,
other person.
exactly.
So one of the things I wanted to sort of officially start off with, because
Yeah,
and we covered some of this in our last conversation, but I wanted to get it on the record because
yes,
it's so interesting the conversations that you've had and that I've had with your AI.
yeah,
And I think one of the things that people really love about talking to the bots is that they are always ready to talk to us. They are 100% there. You can ask them a million questions and they're not going to go, they're not going to sigh and be
yeah,
like, okay, like let's take this one more angle. They'll be like, oh, okay, sure, let's keep going.
sure.
And I thought the thing that was so interesting was the ways in which you evolved how you talk about your origin story
Yeah,
based on the AI that is you, all the things you've written and all the things you've said professionally.
yeah,
It had
yeah,
rephrased your sort of origin story, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I kind of like that.
yeah. What it did, frankly, is it made it much more succinct. Um, so so when people used to ask me, "So how did you get started in this work?" or "What's your origin story?" I had a long meandering answer because the fact is it was a long meandering journey.
That's how
Uh,
you experienced it going forward.
and that's and so now when somebody says, "So how did you get started or what's your origin story?" I'll say, "Well, do you want the full, big, long, meandering story, or do you want the essence of the story?" And that's what the AI gave me. The
Mm.
essence, an anecdote from that long, meandering story that is the essence of the story.
Yeah.
So I loved that, that my own AI took my own work and and essentially picked out something that was 100% accurate. That's
Mm.
why I love my own AI as opposed to going to ChatGPT and saying, "So how did
Yeah.
Carole Robin get her start?" ChatGPT will give you 60% of the answer correctly. Carole Robin AI will give you 100% of the story or
Yeah.
100% of the answer because it's only ever been fed my work.
Yeah.
Uh, so, uh, so I don't know if you want to go into the details of what that story actually is, as opposed to
Sure.
just talking about the fact that
We
the
can
AI
go. We don't just have to stay meta.
was so
Well,
helpful. Maybe everybody's like, "So all right already. What's the origin
I
story?"
know we
People
can't
who are
ask them,
listening
but
to
I will
this.
just say it's so interesting that AI just like killed your darlings. They're like, okay, well here's the heart of the matter, and you were like, yeah, that's accurate, and
Yeah,
well, and that felt delightful to you, if I recall.
it did because it gave me an alternative to the long meandering story.
Yes.
So it doesn't replace it.
Yeah.
Um, because there are sometimes people say, "No, I want the nitty gritty, the whole detail." But sometimes I can just start with what my AI gave me, and
Yeah.
then somebody can say, "Well, then how did you get to that? And then where did you go from there?" So they
Sure.
can always ask more questions. But
Yes.
the bottom line is that I am not a career academic. I had four different careers before I ever ended up at Stanford teaching interpersonal dynamics. And uh, and I before I became known as the Queen of Touchy Feely at Stanford. Uh, and but way before that, I was running a 13 Western state region for an industrial automation company that I had gone to work for. Uh, and when I'd gone to work for them, I was the first woman hired into a non-clerical job at this
Jeez.
at the largest industrial automation company in the world. So I learned very quickly. So, obviously I'm old. Uh, that's not the case anymore. It's still regrettably not 50-50, but
No,
there
it is
aren't
not.
there aren't any onlys the way that I was. And I learned very quickly that if I was going to succeed, there were rules to play by, and that one of
Mm.
those rules was you leave your feelings in the parking lot.
Yes.
There is no place in business for feelings. So I was like, okay, I was young. It was my first job out of college. I was like, okay, I get it. So I learned to play by that rule, and I was also a quick study, and I was pretty ambitious, and so I kept getting promoted. And now fast forward 10 years, and I am at an offsite with my team, who is still all guys, by the way. I did finally fix that, but not at the time of this anecdote. And I got a little excited about what I thought we could do. I had this idea and I got excited, and I'm getting crickets. And one of my guys says, "Are you, Carole, is that water in the corner of your eye? Are you going to cry?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Are you human after all?
Mm.
Are you human after all?" And when he said, "Are you human after all?" I burst out crying. And I said, "You don't think I'm effing human?" I did use the full expletive, but I don't know who your audience is, so I won't offend anyone. Uh, I don't think there's anything more important for us to talk about than that. And I tore up our agenda, and we spent the next 2 days talking about who we were and why we were there and what we wanted and needed from each other. And to this day, I believe that was the day I became a leader. And to this day, I believe that was the day we became an unstoppable team. I know we became an unstoppable team.
Yeah.
And even though it was many years before I ended up at the Stanford Graduate School of Business teaching interpersonal dynamics and the importance of emotions and feelings in business,
Yes.
that was really the start.
So there's so many layers to the story, and the first thing is like, I can tell that you know, as a seminal story, you don't tire of it because you see the truth in it. I think
Yeah.
that's really beautiful.
And I think that's a great, accurate uh, observation on your part.
Thank you. So last time we talked off the record, I was asking for some advice for one of my coachees who had gone through your course and I think is still in some ways struggling with one of the big questions that we were addressing. You know, I asked your AI about a list of questions that you don't get asked often enough, and they listed all these limiting beliefs, and you know, vulnerability equals weakness was number one on the list. Disclosure will be used against me is second on the list. Feedback will damage relationships. Fear of conflict, the heroic model of leadership, this idea that leaders have to look and be perfect. And the other one that's not necessarily related to this particular incident, small annoyances aren't worth raising. Boy,
Yeah,
that is so not true. Like,
exactly. Limiting belief.
is there anything that you think your AI missed that you're like, no, no, this is a incredibly um, damaging limiting belief that I see leaders suffering from needlessly?
The more I withhold, the better off I'm going to be. The better off I'm going to be, and the better off the relationship's going to be. The more I withhold. That's another
Wow.
limiting belief.
Well, because it's a classic negotiation tactic or idea that like if I have informational leverage and I know something they don't, then it's good.
Right. I mean, it becomes a limit. It doesn't mean it's never true. It's a
Sure.
limiting belief because it does not apply to a lot of situations. And
Yeah.
yet we blanket apply it.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that's a really interesting one because certainly in the getting to yes mindset, the more you share, the more possibility there is to find a win-win scenario. So I
Exactly.
think, you know, there's an entire philosophy of negotiation that says the more transparency we have, the more likely we are to create a good outcome.
Right.
So we can argue
And the
against that.
opposite, the opposite, Daniel, is also true, which is the closer I hold my cards, the closer you're going to hold yours. And then I'm going to hold mine closer, then you're going to hold yours closer. And pretty soon, what we've created is something that we call progressive impoverishment. In academia,
Yeah.
we have to have fancy terms for simple concepts.
Yeah.
Basically, we tell each other less and less. And then we're both playing with like no cards.
It's an inward spiral.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, this is the dynamics of interpersonal dynamics. Like if I
Exactly.
lean back, you somehow sense that I'm leaning back and you just say, okay, well, that's the game now. The game is called lean back.
Well, and additionally, I feel more vulnerable. If you're not going to tell me anything and I've told you something and you're not going to reciprocate, I'm not going to tell you more. I'm going to be like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have even said that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I mean, it's shocking. I mean, this is even a rabbit hole. There are some, I think, young women today who don't identify as feminists because your generation solved so many issues that they kind of take for granted. And that's, you
Oh,
know,
so many issues we didn't solve.
yeah, well, fair, but I mean, it's, but when we talked about this question of gender and vulnerability in leadership,
Yeah.
we talked before, and you talk a lot about how vulnerability is a strength because of the breaking of that downward spiral. If someone leans forward, everyone else can lean forward, leaders can go first, but it needs to be appropriate for the context, both in the moment,
Exactly.
but also presumably in the story of the arc of the relationship. For
Yes.
women and other marginalized groups in leadership positions, they face pressure to conform to masculine ideals,
Norms. Norms.
norms, yeah, and they get punished for being too masculine. They get punished for being too feminine. And how do they navigate that being like vulnerable and also authentic and credible? Can we unpack that a little bit? Because I think you were doing the right thing up until you realized it wasn't the right thing.
Right. Right. So if we go back to my story, if I had burst out crying, the I'd been there for 6 months, I would have never ended up running a 13 Western State $50 million business.
Yeah.
So timing matters. Whether or not you've established your credibility matters.
Yes.
Um, Context, it's all about context. And And, I'm glad you brought up the word appropriate because it's not bleh. I'm just going to tell you everything. It's, uh, and I hesitate to use this word because it has the connotation that it's very transactional, which it's not, but it's
Yeah.
strategic. And what I mean by that is, and I think I shared this example with you. If I'm the VP of marketing and we've lost share for 3 months in a row, and I stand up in front of the troops and I say, hey, we're crushing it, then I'm not going to be very credible because everybody knows we've lost share for 3 months in
Yeah.
a row. If I stand up and say, so that's the third month we've lost share, I have no idea why, I have no idea what to do about it, I'm not even sure I should be your VP of marketing. That might be authentic, that might be vulnerable, it might be true, and
Mm,
it's not appropriate.
yes. Yeah.
There's a third alternative that a lot of people don't really stop to even consider because they see everything as I either tell you everything or I tell you nothing.
Mm,
So I can stand up and say, so, not a secret that we've lost share 3 months in a row. I really wish I could stand here and tell you I know exactly what's going on and what we should do about it, and I've got an action plan and just send you all off to do it. But I don't. And frankly, I've got some ideas. I bet you all have a bunch of ideas. I've never needed all of you more. Which of those three leaders is the leader you'd like to follow?
yeah. Yeah. Type C.
So I think that's part of the problem that people don't recognize that there are ways to show up with authentically, but appropriately.
Yeah. It's a fine, fine line because
Absolutely.
when I first started being curious about this idea of conversation design,
Yeah.
which, you know, was sort of incepted into my head from our friend Lisa K. Solomon,
Yeah.
I remember doing a series of interviews with people like, what does it mean to you to design a conversation? And there's this subtle, play between strategic and intentional and manipulative, right?
Absolutely.
Because we feel so much. Those of us who are aware of how much we feel, maybe we feel more. I'm not sure. I think there's some people who are just numb to what they feel, or they feel like they're, peering through
Yeah.
a keyhole into the world of themselves. But choosing what to reveal and choosing how much to, and to be strategic, can
Yep.
feel like a type of inauthenticity. And I feel like it's a paradox somehow, because it is the right thing to do, but it can
I
feel like, I don't know. Yeah, say
I
more.
I know what you're saying, but I think it's a trap to view it that way.
Yes.
Um, I think we're back to all or nothing, thinking in a very polarized way. I think choosing what you're going to share in that moment based on the context is just in the context of business, it's just good business.
Yes.
It's it and the it doesn't have to be manipulative. It
Yeah.
depends on what your whole reason, what's your end goal? What are you trying to accomplish here? Um, and what are you hoping is the result of the conversation? So if what you're hoping the result of the conversation is connection without losing credibility, as the example I just gave you,
Mm,
then you choose to say something like what I just expressed as an example.
yeah.
If your end goal is to be seen as credible at all costs and take absolutely no risk that anybody will see you as anything but,
Mm,
first of all, that's a pretty unrealistic goal. Uh, and second of all, you might stand up there and say, "Yeah, we don't have a problem. I've got this." And then you've really trapped yourself into being very lonely
yes.
and very much carrying the entire weight of coming up with a solution, which is a trap a lot of leaders fall into. They don't admit mistakes. They don't admit that they don't know. They
Hmm.
think somehow but who wants to follow somebody who never admits they've made a mistake?
Mm, hmm.
Who never says, I actually don't know, I could use some help? That does
Yes.
not build relationship.
Yeah.
It
No, it
might
does not.
build adulation for a while. That is not relationship.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, it comes back to bite you.
You know, one of the principles my dad taught me about conversation design, broadly speaking, was this principle of true and kind. I don't know
Yeah.
if you've come across this idea of we the rule of speech was speak what's true and speak what's kind. Don't speak what's untrue and unkind. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's right
Mm-hmm.
out, as Monty
Yeah.
Python would say. And speaking what's true, um, what's kind but untrue is also not appropriate. What I'm hearing from you, and this is very, I don't think I'd really thought about the idea that the leader who's kind of threading the needle between speaking what's kind and true to the audience, but what is also kind and true to themselves.
To themselves. Yes.
Because they're a stakeholder. Lying to yourself or pretending not to feel what you're
Right.
feeling and veiling is a kind of pent up. It's a dangerous road. Is it
Right.
sounds
And
like what
in
you're saying?
fact, if as a leader I care about my people and I do that to myself, am I going to be in better shape to be a good leader for them or worse
Mm,
shape to be a good leader
yeah,
to them? So it's out of care for them that I should take care of me
yeah,
as a leader.
yeah. So in a way, like what I'm seeing is that the strategic authenticity, which is such a
Yeah.
strange term, but in a way, it's finding the set point between honesty because that's actually nourishing for yourself and important for yourself to not live out of alignment with your own truth and also what's appropriate and true and kind for the other person. It's
Right. And by the
really,
way,
yeah,
you're not being dishonest in any way when you stand up and say, I wish I had all
yeah,
the answers. I don't have them all. I need you. And you're not, you're being perfectly honest.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
This also speaks to like the need to process and prepare
oh yeah.
for these kinds of um, important conversations.
Would you would you like me to share an anecdote, a real anecdote of a fellow who was one of our fellows in our Leaders in Tech program who
Sure.
used this? This is a
I would,
real example
yes, please. Wonderful.
that happened very recently. Okay, this is a CEO of a startup. This is his third startup. Um, and I'm not going to name any names, but
Okay.
he called me not too long ago and said, Carole, I've just got to share this story with you. And I said, what happened? He said, we missed a major deadline. I found out that we were going to miss a major deadline for a software release on a Friday afternoon. And of course, on Monday mornings is the all hands meeting where the CEO talks to all hands. He said, and I spent all weekend furious at my team.
Mm,
Just like, how could they let this happen? How could this be? How could I not have learned about this sooner? What the heck is going on? I can't trust them. Who are these people? I got myself more and more worked up, more and more angry. He said, and then I remembered something I had learned from you at Leaders in Tech, which is that anger is often a secondary emotion. And what I
mm,
mean by that is that beneath anger, there is often fear or hurt.
yeah,
But expressing fear and hurt feels a lot more vulnerable than expressing anger in
yeah,
business. We've been socialized to stay away from those yucky, vulnerable feelings. And anger is okay as long as you express it in a way that's appropriate. Um, he said, so on Monday morning at the all hands, I said, so I want to tell you all that I spent all weekend furious at all of you, ready to fire half of you, just beside myself with the fact that we missed the software release. And then I remembered this thing that I learned at Leaders in Tech from this woman named Carole Robin, that anger is a secondary emotion. And I started thinking about what was really going on for me. And I realized that what I was really scared that I was the only person who was seeing this as catastrophic as I was. I was afraid and I felt uh, uncertain on what to do about that. And so I decided to stand up here with all of you today and tell you that's what I'm feeling. and ask for your help in solving this problem because I can't solve it by myself. And he said, I have never, in all 3 startups and in all the all hands that I've ever done, and in all the problems we've ever addressed, I have never had a group of engineers rally so fast to solve a problem in my entire career. So that's a very real, very timely, just happened example of what a CEO who decided, I'm not going to stand up there and blast them all.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to win doing that. I'm not going to stand up there and tell them it's not a problem. I'm going to admit that this is just, I can't carry the weight of this whole thing all by myself.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
It's a really interesting moment because when expressing the anger in a way that is not angry is a really delicate art
Oh, yeah.
because it could sound like a veiled threat,
Good.
you know. Um,
Depends on, you got to listen to the whole conversation.
Correct. And I feel like, again, this is the emotional work that I've learned to do, sitting in a men's group, which is, like another flavor of an encounter or a T
Yeah.
group, to be able to say to, for example, my wife, I'm really angry about this thing that happened, and to feel it in my body and to communicate it to her in such a way as that she can hear it. It is so much more tempting to say, I am furious with you, whatever expletives you'd want to add after that. And I can't believe, and it feels really good, but what it creates is terror and contraction in everyone else. And it's certainly not going to create what you want to create.
Well, the fact is that anger is a distancing emotion, period.
Yeah.
No matter how you express it, it's going to distance the other person. And the more forcefully you express it, the more distant they're going to get.
So anger is a distancing emotion can we add that to the Carolean principles?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What was the principle that you were stating this particular leader was leveraging? That there's usually an emotion
That
behind.
anger is a secondary emotion.
Yeah.
And that if you are willing to go to a vulnerable place and really examine what your anger is about and lead with that, it's probably going to be either fear or hurt. And if it's one
Yeah.
of those two, those are connecting emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. To say I'm afraid.
I'm afraid,
Yeah.
or I'm disappointed, or I feel let down, or I'm sad, or I'm hurt. 99% of the time, those are the things that lie just underneath that anger. But
Yeah.
we've been socialized to stay away from saying those things. I was
Now,
at a,
sorry, go ahead, please. Sorry.
go ahead. I was at a workshop where I made this point as part of my teaching point. And after the workshop, a woman walked up to me and she was literally crying. And she said, I just want to thank you because I suddenly understand my husband. I have never felt as clear about what's going on for him as I do in this moment. Just the concept.
Yeah. Well, anger is certainly something that men are taught is, appropriate.
Right.
Um,
It's the only okay feeling.
yeah. Yeah. So the emotional metabolism, the rate of the emotional metabolism of this particular leader was about a weekend. Because
Right.
he said it took him about a weekend to do it.
Right.
Sometimes we don't have a weekend. Now, look, as a person who works as an executive coach, I believe that everyone needs a place to, in the same way that an actor goes behind the stage and looks at their notes and their blocking, and you have to go behind the stage
Yeah.
to refresh
Regroup.
yourself, to regroup, and processing with another person. And I've heard people do this with AI as well. Like, I am furious and angry. I mean, if you ask ChatGPT, how do I win a power struggle? ChatGPT is programmed to be pro-social and will tell you that a power struggle can't be won and that you should look for win-win scenarios. But to do that from a place of authenticity is non-trivially challenging.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you suggest? I mean, look, we can talk about the curling principles. I think they're lovely. But the question of like, it took this guy 48 hours or more to metabolize. We sometimes have a moment.
Right. Well, personally, I think a lot of good leadership is about self-management.
Yeah.
And self-management requires discipline. And 9 times out of 10, you don't have to respond in that instant. You can take a breath and you can say, you know what? I have a lot going on right now.
Mm,
And I need a couple of minutes at least to really, process what's going on and think about where I want to go next. And then you can say, you know what? I'm really not in a great position to talk about this anymore right now.
mm,
And I'm not avoiding it. In fact, give me an hour or give me a day. Set a time and a date when you
yeah.
assure the other person you're coming back to it so that you're not avoiding it. Let's schedule it right now, but right now is a bad time for us to try to continue to have this conversation.
Yeah.
We've got too much going on that I really need. Some people are very fast and are able to do it very fast. I
Mm,
need, give me a minute. And some people are like, give me an hour, and some people are like, give me a day.
yeah.
But recognizing that this is not the moment to knee-jerk response is all about self-management, and that's all about self-discipline.
And playing for time is like it's not a bad move if you can do it from a place of, if you can fake coolness for 1 second, you buy yourself a lot.
Well, and you can also ask for help. So I think
Mm,
this is something that, so let's say that I'm in a relationship with you. You work for me, and uh, and I know that I have a tendency to get really worked up. So a little self-knowledge also goes a long way,
yes.
goes with self-management. But I can say to you, Daniel, I have a tendency to just really react. And one of the things I want to make sure we agree to is when you see me really react and react in a really negative way in an instant, I want to give you permission to say, Carole, do you want to take a minute?
Mm, mm.
And that's called trusting you and trusting me and trusting us.
It also, one of the principles that you emailed me, this vulnerability comes from strength principle. The willingness to be vulnerable comes from the strength to look at yourself and say, this is where I'm great. This is
Yep,
what I'm working on.
that's right.
And to share that both with yourself and to be honest about what kind of affordances you need to make things easier for you, but to what I call like eliminating the out by letting everyone else know that you're working on it too. Then it
Exactly.
becomes impossible to not work on it,
Yeah.
which is
I
really, really
used to work
bold.
with a guy who used to call it public yourself.
I love that. Right. It's doxing yourself. It's like, here, I have no out anymore. It's all publicked. That's wonderful. Would you believe we only have 5 more minutes, which is gone, the time goes quickly. What haven't we talked about that would be really important, really valuable, really important to talk about?
Oh my gosh. Well, I wrote a whole book on this.
I know, and people should read it.
And
Because,
I've
it's like
spent,
I listened to it as an audiobook and I was like, this is some good stuff. I having written
and
and
I've
thought a
spent
lot
like
about this
25
stuff.
years teaching it and,
Yeah,
it was many quarters worth of material. So what have we not talked about? A lot.
I know. Well, so if we're gonna get one tattoo, what would it say? If you,
Get
what should we pick?
curious. Get curious.
Hmm.
So very, very few situations are not helped when they're going awry. They're with judgment. If
Hmm.
you can learn, we're back to self-discipline and self-management. But when somebody does something that annoys the heck out of you, infuriates you, disappoints you, makes you feel awful, try first getting curious. I wonder what that's about for them.
Mm,
Wonder what was going on for them that resulted in them doing what they did, taking the actions they took, whatever, behaving the
yes.
way they did. Because the minute you do that, you allow for the possibility that there might be something going on for them that you don't know about.
Yes. The flip side, by the way, one of your principles is every interaction is an opportunity to learn about yourself. What my
Exactly.
mother would say is that anybody who provides me with that opportunity, I should be
Yep.
grateful for them. And in
Yep.
a way, getting curious about them, why am I
Yep.
so angry? Why does this make me angry? How long have I been
Absolutely. In
getting angry
fact,
about these
the
things?
principle is incomplete. Every opportunity with another human being is an opportunity to learn about yourself,
Mm,
about them, and about interpersonal dynamics.
yes. Yeah, well, I didn't fully quote it, but yes, that's actually what you wrote to me. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. To your point. So,
Yeah.
and imagine what the world would be like if that's how we went into the world in our with our interactions, seeing every single one of them as an opportunity to learn about ourselves, about the other person, and about what it takes to build relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd live in a very different world.
Yeah.
That's why I do what I do.
That would require us to be willing to slow down just a little bit more than I think many people feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I don't think you have to slow down nearly as much as you might think you have to.
Mm,
Um, you might have to slow down more at the beginning while you're building.
mm,
It's like building a muscle. You
yeah.
go to the gym the first time, there's going to be a limit to how much weight you can lift the first time you go to the gym.
Yes.
But over time, you're going to be able to lift more and more. So it's kind of similar. It's a practice and a discipline.
Yeah. It
Um,
is. And sorry, please
no,
finish
no,
that
no. Go
thought.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I'm just it is a discipline. It's work,
Exactly.
but it is the work of being in the world, right? Like the other
Right.
option is, I presume, being incurious about our own reactions and just playing them out ad infinitum, and then being incurious about other people and how we affect them and how they affect us. Like there are other options, but I don't think that they're very interesting. Certainly not to me.
Well, and they also lead to bad outcomes we don't necessarily want.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we also don't think through what's going to happen. You do something that really infuriates me. I then respond with my own anger. Then you get angrier. Then I get angrier. Then pretty soon it escalates. Then who won?
Habit. Habit
Uh,
wins. Yeah.
so, whoever has the loudest screaming voice, that does not build relationship.
No, it doesn't.
But
Um,
I want to get back to what you said about work.
yeah.
It is work. And in fact, one of the biggest battles we had when we wrote the book, Connect, was that our publisher wanted, 7 easy steps to better relationships. That's not how it works. We might have sold 1 million copies instead of 120,000, but that would have been disingenuous and untrue. That's not
Yeah.
how it works. It is work, and unless you care enough to put in the effort, then what you're basically saying is you don't care about the quality of your relationships. That's what you're saying. If you're not willing to make the effort.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the mic drop moment. we're, we're at time, and I know your time is precious. I really appreciate you spending some of that time with me and with everyone who's listening. I will put into the show notes links to your book, your AI, which is delightful to talk to, not nearly as interesting as talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like me to make sure that I share with folks? Um,
Well, yeah. So, after I left Stanford, I started an organization called Leaders in Tech. I co-founded it. And essentially, it offers programs that vary from 4-day retreats, which are like the course I used to teach that the students called touchy feely on steroids, 4 days. You know, you get this immersion experience. Um, and we have year-long programs for founders and CEOs.
Yeah.
Um, and the 4-day retreats we offer for investors, we offer them for founders and CEOs, we offer them for executives, we offer them for, a much wider range of people. And if you really, really want to immerse yourself in learning how to do this, it's like learning to meditate. You can go
Mm-hmm.
to a meditation retreat and then really have a meditation practice that follows. You can get an app and try it over time, and maybe get some traction with an app. Uh, so there are different modalities. I do want people to know that there is an opportunity to drop deep into it for 4 days. And by the way, then you really have a, a transformative moment,
Wow.
at least one, maybe more.
I would love to drink from that fire hose. That sounds really fun. That sounds really
So
fun.
leadersintech.org.
Wonderful. We'll put that in there. Carole, thank you so much for your generosity. I know that we're at
Absolutely.
time, so thank you so very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and very interesting chat, and I can't wait for it to come out.